Welcome to our webinar featuring planning system backups for successful cyber recovery, a cybersecurity webinar for non-technical local leaders. I'm Mark Levine, and I'm the Deputy Director of your New York State Association of Counties. Public sector organizations still find themselves not being able to successfully recover their environment after a cyber attack. This webinar will focus on what constitutes a secure, immutable, and stable backup of your data and how that can impact obtaining and lowering cyber insurance and ensuring a more successful recovery in a shorter amount of time. This discussion will build off of the Cybersecurity Primer for local leaders put out by NISAC and help ensure local governments can recover all data quickly and efficiently and continue to meet the many of the cybersecurity laws and regulations that we face. This is part of our cybersecurity webinar series co-sponsored by NISAC, the Association of Towns, the New York Conference of Mayors, and the New York Municipal Insurance Reciprocal. Recordings of previously aired webinars are available at www.nisac.org/cyber. Before we begin, we have a few brief housekeeping announcements. Our Director of Education and Training is Jeanette Stanziano, and she's running today's webinar. Jeanette.
Thank you, Mark. Just want to remind everyone that we will be recording this program as we do with all NISAC webinars, and we'll be posting that recording with a PDF of the slides at the conclusion of this program on the NISAC website at nisac.org under webinars. We also want to encourage you to feel free to submit written questions at any time during the presentation, and we will answer those questions in an open forum during the Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation today. To submit your questions, please click on the Questions tab and then just simply type in your question and submit it. We will circle back to those questions at the end of the program with Mark moderating a brief Q&A. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jeanette. And we are honored today to have two experts in the field of cybersecurity, in particular in the field of backups to improve your cybersecurity posture. They are Joe Dabrowski, the Vice President of Sales for Rubrik. Joe leads America's sales and business strategy at Rubrik, working with SLED customers around the country on leveraging the Rubrik data security platform to drive cyber resiliency. Joe is an accomplished technology executive with 20 years experience. Previously, he served in sales and leadership positions at NetApp, Splunk, and EMC. Joe was born and raised in the Syracuse area and currently resides in McLean, Virginia. Joining Joe is Alexa Steffen, the Senior Solutions Engineer for New York and New Jersey for Rubrik. Alexa is a Senior Solutions Engineer helping our New York and New Jersey SLED customers with their ransomware protection plans and strategy. Prior to Rubrik, Alexa spent the better part of the last decade working at HPE, designing and modeling infrastructure as a service offerings and other data center projects. Alexa currently resides in Long Island. Thank you, Joe and Alexa, for joining us and helping to train our members today. At this time, I'm honored to hand it over to Joe. Joe?
Awesome, Mark. I appreciate it. All right, everyone. As Mark said, I'm Joe Dabrowski, and I'm going to take us through some of our thoughts today about what we've observed during, unfortunately, many cyber recoveries. So I think I just want to start with a little bit of context for everyone, because the idea of recovering from, quote unquote, a disaster has been around our enterprise IT world for the better part of 50 years, right? But many of the things that we've built our plans, our contingency plans, our recovery plans around have been from what I call known recovery events. things like fires, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, things like that, right? These are generally events where you know kind of what happened, when it happened, what time it happened, so you've got a much better idea to recover. When you compare that with a cyber event, you often don't know that the bad guys are even in there to begin with. You don't know how long they've been there, and you don't know what they have done or are doing to your data and infrastructure. On top of that, that's becoming much more probable, right? For many, many years, I've looked at, and enterprise IT has looked at, events in kind of two ways, right? There's been operational recoveries, which are generally highly probable but low impact events, right? Somebody deleting a file or maybe a piece of infrastructure like a server having an issue. The fires and floods are things that are much less likely to happen, but when they do happen, cause tremendous amount of stress, pain, and challenges in recovery. But we've got this third class of event now, and the cyber events are both highly probable and highly impactful. And many organizations, as we've seen, unfortunately, dragged out in the news, have really struggled to recover from them, and the impacts on our clients, our residents, our constituents is very, very impactful, right? So we need to kind of get ahead of this, and what we're going to talk about here for the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so is how do we do that? But before we go into that, I will advance the slide. So unfortunately, like I said, the news media has very much picked up on some of the challenges that local governments, state governments, and educational organizations are faced with. And this is playing out in a massive way, right? We've seen it just in the last few weeks alone, right? Dallas, for example, emergency services were down. We've seen election cybersecurity issues. We've seen attacks on the city of Lowell, Massachusetts, right, where they've now been down for 3 weeks. I think everyone probably saw the events of Suffolk County unfold very publicly in the news media. So these issues, unfortunately, have gotten worse in the last year and are kind of escalating. And the bad guys know that they can attack local governments, state governments, because there's a lot of sensitive data there. They know that we might be a little bit shorthanded from a staff perspective and maybe a budget one. And they unfortunately view us as kind of one of their most likely and, I guess, juicy targets. So as we move on to kind of what I've observed over the last year or so, I've just recently updated this slide for the first half of 2023. But as of 2022, we've saw almost 70% of local governments reported having some sort of cyber event that involved a recovery. IBM came out with a survey that said the average cost of a ransomware recovery event is $4.54 million. But the interesting thing about that, I guess, survey was that they found that over 50% of those costs are 1 year post breach, meaning that there's a significant long tail associated with these events. So it's not like they just kind of come and they go. They have generally many months type of events with plenty of follow-on activities. Meanwhile, everyone has backups, right? For years, almost every single local government in the US does have some capability to back up their data. However, in the last couple of years, the bad guys have really turned their focus on that. They actually attack the backup copies and the backup process itself, because they know if they do that, you can't recover. Also turns out that if you're backing something up, it means it's probably important, and therefore there's probably sensitive data in there. But what we also see is that the organizations that get in front of this challenge, and by protecting their backups and updating their plans to account for the differences of a cyber event, recover their data much quicker at a much lower cost than those that didn't think through those problems. To further complicate matters, we've got cyber insurance rates skyrocketing. Both premiums of deductibles have gone up in a meaningful way, and the pressures on us, as consumers of these insurance products, to demonstrate our, practices and hygiene in an effort to keep these rates low. So the yearly attestation forms have grown considerably, and that puts an additional stress on already stretched thin organizations. Furthermore, some states are banning public funds being used to pay ransoms. So the only choice you do have is to recover. But last thing I'll say on this kind of subject here is we are up against two kind of distinctive enemies, if you will. The most likely organization or bad actor to attack local government is what we call a RAS actor, so ransomware as a service. These are loosely affiliated gangs that constantly are shifting their, brandings and ownerships, if you will. They operate oftentimes in many of the countries you'd suspect, right, where they're allowed to operate with impunity. And their goal, quite frankly, is to get in, exfiltrate your data, lock up the rest of your data, and get money out of you as quickly as possible, right? They're financially motivated, in other words. Meanwhile, we also were dealing with nation state actors who are systemically going after things like critical infrastructure or the largest cities, counties, and in education institutions in the country. Right? These are the classic people who, we've been, challenged with for many years. And they are what we call advanced persistent threats because they have the wherewithal, the dollars, and the patience to continually attack American organizations in an effort to, get in the way of, our ability to recover. Hold on one second, I need to grab a drink of water. Thank you, sorry about that. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Actually, I'll hand the ball over here to Alexa. Alexa, do you want to go through what you've observed at the last meeting?
Absolutely. Give it to populate here. There we go. Great, thanks, Joe. So last week we were in attendance at the New York State Cybersecurity Conference. This was a great chance for us to get to meet with, other New York State customers and get to hear some insight from other technical folks within the industry itself, right? So this message that we're preaching to you today and we're delivering to you today is not something that is unique to our mentality of how we approach cybersecurity as a whole and backup today. This is something you can see is coming directly from our security counterparts at AWS, for example. So Kiesens Phillips gave a great conversational keynote last week to everybody in attendance. And really the overall theme was that, we need to adjust the way we're approaching the state of our IT environments today. We need to be able to really begin adapting to this changing threat landscape that Joe just showcased for us in the previous slide. And we need to figure out what are the most beneficial ways to respond and to provide our organizations with the best defenses possible. And so I think most importantly is that we need to be able to assume breach as a state of mind. So this concept of there being a lower level cybersecurity incident versus a more critical one, we need to start addressing each potential cyber threat with the same severity as we would a major or a minor type of attack within our environments. So typically we hear, this is the way we've always done it. Everything works, why fix what we're doing today? And that's just not going to work in today's landscape. So these bad actors are exploiting on the way we've always done things, and they're really beginning to sort of take advantage of those types of systems that have been unable to really adapt to new mindsets and new ways of protecting their environments today. And I think secondly, what she was talking about that was very important was being able to consider within your organization how quickly you can respond to these cyber attacks. So typically, we used to just talk about, could we respond, right? And being able to respond is not enough anymore, because being able to respond, as we've seen with some of the examples Joe provided, it could take months, right? And, we each know what that uniquely means to our organizations. But if you're unable to continue your core business functions on a day-to-day basis, that's crippling to, your end users, to your county, to the state. It starts becoming a domino effect throughout the organization and throughout the residents and whoever might be impacted from some sort of event happening within the environment. So we need to really prioritize the speed that we're doing the recovery efforts. And then lastly is disaster recovery cannot just be a conversation anymore. It can't just be something where we have a response in the means of, we're implementing multiple sites or whatever that response typically was previously. It really needs to be a fully tested and fully vested scenario where we have all the major players within the organization on board so that we're very synchronized in our recovery efforts.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so this is by far the most technical slide I have, so please don't hold this against me, but I did want to set some context about where kind of backup lives and how are they related to all the other investments we've made in cybersecurity. The majority of the cybersecurity investments and tools are out there to keep the bad guys out, right? These are things that kind of protect your estate and don't let them in. They block bad traffic and allow good traffic. But what we're talking about is very much from the data layer, right? So we're talking about from the data on up, because data is different. And unfortunately, there has not been a lot of, security capabilities added to data to build resilience to data. And that's really kind of what we're talking about today. And then on the next slide, what I'm going to show you is really what we've observed during an attack, right? So, and you can just kind of build this slide out, if you will. So you've got two choices when the bad guys gets in your environment. Right now, you could potentially, figure out how to buy some Bitcoin and potentially pay them to give you keys that will decrypt your data. But oftentimes what we see is there's significantly long recoveries. The keys don't always work. You don't always get all your data back, right? So oftentimes what many organizations want to work on is how do we recover? So to recover, you're going to need to, if you will, engage security and IT folks. In some large counties, they're different teams. In many counties, it's the same folks, right? So do we have enough just people to help us do this recovery? So as we continue to build out this kind of attack scenario, there's a few questions that we need to ask ourselves. One is, can we recover at all? In other words, have we taken steps to ensure that our backup estate lives on? Because again, the bad guys are attacking the legacy infrastructures, the things that we've been using for years, just like Alexa said. From there, you need to figure out what the bad guys did. This is a new type of recovery. Unlike the fires and floods, where you know where it started and what happened, a cyber recovery is very unknown. Further complicate matters, bad guys have been in your environment for a while, meaning you have backups with malware in it. And therefore, if you recover that data, you could restart an infection, which lengthens the recovery time. From there, it's all about the recovery process. How long will it take? What systems do we bring up first? What are our most critical applications? Is it, the 911 system, or is it a permitting system? Is it something, people paying water bills? What is it? What are those critical applications? Those are the hard questions that are different than a normal, again, fire, flood type of event. So it's a very kind of hard thing to go through the first time when the bright lights are on and there's a lot of pressure. And unfortunately, these recoveries can take days, if not weeks. Therefore, you're dealing with a lot of, challenges with human resource capital, right? People get tired, they get cranky, they get overworked, they sleep under desks, they don't eat well, they're not home with their families. So this can be very, very hard on people. The psychological impacts of a cyber recovery are very, very much like being in some sort of like massive car wreck or something like that. So it's much different than what we've been used to over the years. So the questions now are a board level conversation. I almost fell out of my chair about 2 years ago when we saw the CEO from Colonial Pipeline dragged in front of Congress, and he's being asked about if he had good backups. So from an executive priority standpoint is, can we recover it all? Can you demonstrate it for me? And how long will it take to be up? Because it's not a matter, like Alexa said, of if, it's a question of when. So if you don't have a good plan on how you're going to recover, if you're figuring it out for the first time when the bad guys are there, your recovery process is going to take much longer and the impacts are going to be more. The costs are going to be higher, and it's going to be all around more painful. And that's what we're really trying to avoid with this type of recovery. So our point of view is backup is not cyber recovery. There needs to be a better way. I'll give you a great example. The city and county of Durham, North Carolina, both were hit with subsequent ransomware attacks. These things always happen on holidays, weekends, Friday nights, what have you. So the Friday night, both the city and the county of Durham go down. Parking garages stop working. 911 goes down. The police aren't able to operate effectively. They're back to using radios. The good news for the city of Durham, they were a Rubrik customer. They had drilled and tested a plan. They were able to recover all their critical systems in 4 hours and be fully operational in under a day and a half. The county did not have the foresight to do that. They had to basically rebuild many of their systems from scratch. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, I believe there was some data loss associated with that event, and their recovery times were in the weeks. So that is the difference between having a plan and not having a plan in terms of overall impact. Speaking of Colonial Pipeline, they were a Rubrik customer, but this is the classic example of everyone had backups, but maybe not a plan. So Colonial Pipeline, all of their data was recoverable, right? The data center did have backups. They were Rubrik backups. They were hardened backups. They were recoverable. But what they didn't have is a recovery plan. On top of that, given the criticality of what they do, it got very political. The FBI was involved. The FBI, kind of asked them to pay the bad guys and track some of the money. It was one of the first times they did a Bitcoin style recovery. But it really highlighted to the American public just how critical this could be. I personally was driving, at the time I had a 9-year-old son, was driving him home from, I believe, a golf match, and I couldn't find gas within 40 miles of my house in DC. For an entire week, we didn't have gas in this area. And that was very impactful, right? Because you had to start making decisions. Maybe I'll just walk to the store, luckily I live close to one, right? But the implications of the critical infrastructure side of things are exceedingly high cost to us as Americans. So the next group of slides is going to take you through what I think is one of the worst parts about this. And that is the, let's just call it the reputational harm associated with it, right? I think there is zero shame in having a ransomware or a cyber event at your organization, right? We are playing defense 100% of the time. The bad guys have to be right once. We have to be right every single time, every single day. So therefore, that's why we have focused our capabilities around enhancing the recovery side, because we know the organizations that recover very cleanly and elegantly, they don't get dragged through the news cycle. And the ones that don't, and the ones that don't even have good communications plans and aren't transparent about it, are the ones that get absolutely bludgeoned in the media. In no other example this year that I can think of outside of the city of Oakland. So think about it this way, right? This attack started in early February. So you start seeing the news cycle on the 10th, the city's hit. Oh, on the 14th, PD warns of delayed response times. Okay, they've already been down for a week. 2 days later, it's a state of emergency. Now it's what, we're now 20 days in, 19 days in, they're calling in the government, the National Guard to come help them. They still can't recover. Okay, we're almost at a month now. Now you've got the bad guys rearing their head saying, even if they can recover, I'm going to leak all the data that we stole from you. Okay, now they start releasing the data. Now they come out and say, we hope this will be fixed in 2 weeks. City of Oakland finally becomes transparent and says, hey, we've got some issues with your data being leaked, right? Their actual employee data was exfiltrated during this event. So a month into it, they're unsure how to fix it. A month and a half into it, they said, give me another month. Then they got hit again. 6 weeks later. 80% of organizations that are hit by a cyber event are hit again within 6 months. And the reason for that is that the first bad actor group will sell that data to the next bad actor group of your cyber defense capabilities and the vulnerabilities and what have you, in order to further monetize their attack on you. Because they know you're in a recovery mode, they know you're in a remediation mode. From there, it got worse because then the Oakland Police Union got very upset and they ended up filing a class action lawsuit. There was 11 years of customer data leaked during this attack. They want $25,000 ahead of the persons impacted by this. 2 months into it, they're only 85% back. So services are still down. And the bad guys kept going. And then they start getting questions. And we're 2 months into it. We're now 6 months into it. This is what I mean by the news cycle just absolutely dragging this poor organization through the attack, right? So that's what can go really wrong. Now, what does good look like? We'll get into that in a minute. On top of this, while many of the bad guys are attacking what we call on-prem environments, right? The data centers that you own, they're also attacking what we call SaaS environments or cloud environments. Microsoft 365 is the communications tool. It's email, calendars, OneDrive, SharePoint, things like that. Many organizations moved to M365 during the pandemic as a way to increase work from home. But every day a new attack is launched on M365. And if you think of that, there's a lot of sensitive data in M365. There's a lot of critical data in M365. Many organizations have some of those tool sets from M365 in critical workflows like construction permits or civil service exams, right? They use something like SharePoint or OneDrive in that. So the implications of having these down are pretty bad. So we also need to look to the cloud. The cloud's not infallible as well. Then last but not least is, how do you actually recover, right? You've got a cyber insurer, maybe you've got some sort of incident response partner, but have you tested that, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we bought a product. It's another thing to say we drill this recovery process on a weekly basis. This is one area where Rubrik does help. We've got a ransomware recovery team, but this is more along the lines of, hey, if you're concerned about recovery and you want to answer the executives of how long will we be down, you literally need to go out and simulate a ransomware attack. So there's things we call tabletop exercises. Those are generally high level things of how would we respond in these type of events. But what I'm talking about here is actually drilling for a real ransomware recovery. So one way we help build awareness for this is we put together a program we call Save the Data. It's about a 100 to 120 minute program where we have a scenario style ransomware attack of a retail organization based in the US. And you get to play the role of a CIO or a CISO or somebody who owns an application or someone within IT. So it's a mix of video, scenes where we've recorded some content of boardroom discussion, and then we break out into kind of table reads where you play a part and you get to read through what they go through as they figure out that they've been hit and how they struggle to recover. And all this is to really build awareness. It's not a product pitch. It doesn't even talk about product in it, but what it does do is give people that kind of oh crap moment. hey, maybe we haven't thought through this as well as we thought. Maybe we haven't addressed this at all. Maybe there's things we can improve. Maybe there's lessons we could be learned. So this is very popular. I've personally hosted probably 50 of these in the last year. I've done it for well over, I guess, 1,500 people at this point, and we get tremendous feedback. Just, how enlightening, how eye-opening this is. Some people, lots of laughs are had, as people kind of play their parts. There's a few kind of scary moments in there, if you will, when you kind of question your own recovery process and capabilities. But if nothing else, it builds awareness where it's sorely needed, right? All right, cool. I'm going to hand it back to Alexa, and I'll be on here to help answer questions here in a few minutes.
Thanks, Joe. So this is an overview of our team that's here local and available in the New York region. So, got to hear from Joe. You see him on the bottom right, and myself. And then we also have additionally on the top, we have Sujit, who covers the New York City area, and then Brett, who covers everything upstate New York. Under that, we have Jeff Fazik, who is my engineering leader. And then we have Chris Yanakino, actually joining us on the call today, but he is our sales within the Northeast. So he covers New York and then all of the accompanying states surrounding. So between our team, we've got a good understanding of what's going on, not only within New York State, but also the surrounding states and similar state and local governments that are going through specific challenges that are very relevant to you all. Go to the next slide, Joe. We'll get into some of our specific customers that we've worked with here on the Rubrik platform. So we have some state and local customers that we want to call out here so you can see their logos. We've got Monroe County has been a long-term customer of ours, Schenectady County, Cortland County, town of Hempstead here by where I'm located, Chenango County. We have a couple more statewide agencies as well. So we've got Empire State Development, new Rubrik customer of ours. One thing to point out with them is this will be a pure in the cloud based deployment as well. So we can really morph to however you have your IT environment set up today. Environmental Facilities Corporation, and then we have School Construction Authority within New York City. So it spreads counties and statewide organizations. And then education customers. You can see some of these logos here. We have everything from universities. So we have, NYU, we have Utica, we have local smaller schools. We have, Saratoga Springs School District. We have some of the BOCES. We have Sullivan, BOCES, and Broome, Tioga. And then also we have Lyric, so one of the regional information centers. So we can very much customize this solution and our plans to help anyone, regardless of the size of the organization, what your focus area is. We really have a wide range of the types of customers that we've been actively involved with to help them achieve some of these technology goals that they have. And then outside of our specific state and local government territory, these are some of the other logos within the New York area that I'm sure you're all very familiar with, right? So we have large implementations in the financial sector. You can see some of the, more broadcast, some of the Tiffany, more on the actual commercial side of things. We have New York Presbyterian. We do some research stuff. So we really can expand industries, even though we operate differently, we all, I think, have the same goal at the end of the day, as Joe mentioned, right? We need to keep these bad threat actors out of our environments and protect ourselves as much as possible. So if anyone ever would like to speak with one of these existing customers that you see here, please let us know. And then, as I mentioned, our team reach does go into the rest of the Northeast, and Joe obviously covers the entire country for us. So if there's anyone that you ever wanted to speak with, if you have a unique scenario or situation, we're more than happy to put you in touch with one of these references or align you to someone that has a similar scenario you're trying to solve for today.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Joe. This is Mark Levine, again, the New York State Association of Counties. So I invite all attendees to submit questions in the question box on your GoToWebinar dashboard. The first question, a lot of our members, local governments, counties and towns, cities, have a combination of environments in terms of where they store their data. Some is in the cloud, and some is in their own server environment. So how do we look at backups from that scenario to make sure we have regular backed up data, so that when there is an event, we can make sure all of our sets of data are recoverable?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take this first question. So I think it's pretty common. Again, almost everyone has backups for their on-premises environments that they own. I think the key with kind of the modern challenges we just talked about is that you take specific action to, one, harden those estates against compromise, follow significant best practices, and look at some new, I guess, ideas on how you can better protect just the on-prem backup estate itself, so you can recover it all. Because then again, most of the events that we've seen in the open market, the backups are compromised, they're taken offline, deleted, what have you. Second part to the on-prem recovery is, what is that process, right? And we really talked about that one long and hard today. So it's not only can I recover, but how do I recover? Do I have a good process? Can I test that process and document it? The challenge with cloud recoveries is many people don't understand that it's generally a shared responsibility model within clouds. And in other words, you are responsible for the protection and recovery of your data. The cloud environments themselves are very resilient, right? They have uptime built in, and they do things like replicate copies kind of across zones in case one zone goes offline or goes away or what have you. So there's often uptime guarantees or uptime SLAs with cloud products. But many of the public clouds, pretty much all of them, do not have a recovery SLA. And they very clearly state in their EULA that, again, your data is your responsibility and you need to do things to protect it. From an operational perspective, many organizations are looking for a single environment, if you will, that will protect both. So they can look at their entire footprint, their entire stack, if you will, all of their data, regardless of where it lives. And can they answer the question, are we good? Can we recover this? What does our recovery process look like? So those are the kind of things that I guess we talk to most customers about. Again, ensuring I can recover. Do I have a plan to recover? And then having ensured recoverability across my hybrid cloud environment, right? So both on premises and up in the cloud.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned through the presentation that sometimes the malware will be in our systems for some time before there's an actual breach or incident. So if you're backing up data that has malware in it, how do we ensure that the backup is immutable, as you say that you can do? So what steps can be taken to make sure that the data we recover doesn't have that malware in it?
Yeah, Alexa, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So here at Rubrik, we have mechanisms in place to do, we call them threat hunts. So what we would do, for example, in the case of some sort of event happening within the environment, is we have the ability built into our software to be able to take those parameters that you can collect around the attack. So typically when that attack happens, if it is truly a ransomware event, there's going to be some information released to you in your organization to give you context around who the attack was executed by, potentially what type of malware strain you're looking at. There will be a collection of data and information around the nature of the attack. So first of all, we want to gather all of those, what we call indicators of compromise. So we want to work with you to be able to gather that information. The next step would be taking what you know about the attack and actually running a scan based on those parameters to look at everything within your backup environment that you can. So a lot of the times, this is a very laborious, manual process that has to be executed within an IT team. It usually involves a lot of unnatural collaboration between, I think, the IT teams and the security teams, which is part of the challenge of going through one of these recoveries. But what Rubrik does is we make it very simple to be able to natively and through a very easy to use step-by-step GUI that we use within the Chrome browser on your laptop, right? It makes it very easy for your security team to share information that they have around the type of attack that you are experiencing specifically, work with your infrastructure team, and you guys can actually utilize the scans that we can run within the environment to tell you exactly when we first detect any sort of malware being in the environment. So it could have been sitting there dormant. Typically, we see it there for a couple of days before it ends up being live in an active situation. But we are able to very quickly, within, an hour or two, depending on the size of the environment that we're scanning, tell you exactly the point that you need to recover from to prevent that reinfection. And so right now it's very focused on more of the reactive side, right? So you collect the parameters and after the fact, you're able to do those scans and do that analysis. But where Rubrik is taking our direction is we're integrating abilities to be able to do that proactively. So you don't have to necessarily be undergoing an active attack within your environment to be able to scan for known threats that are out there. We're going to be able to now tie into known exploits, known threats that other organizations are experiencing that get published on these third-party sites as things that you should be looking for as an organization. And we're going to be able to ingest those and begin to proactively scan your backup environment for you so that you don't actually have to wait for something to be actively released into your environment as a threat to be able to know if something is sitting dormant.
Great, thank you. I have a question here on timing. How often should we back up? Are there differences between short-term backup and long-term backup? And backups can take a long time. So what is your recommendation to a county who has a lot of data? How often should they be backing up, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, no problem. So we'd say at the very least, you probably want to complete a backup. If you consider the data, important, right? If somebody would probably pick up the phone and call you if it was lost, right? It's probably important enough to back up. So you can start there. Say 2, most of our customers back up at least daily for almost all data. And for more critical workloads that are maybe a little bit more transactional or busier, they might do it more often, right? So every couple hours, something like that. Backup has come a long way in the last, really the last 8 or 9 years in terms of overall speed, right? It's very common now for organizations to not worry about what used to be called the backup window. In other words, we have to do all our backups overnight so it doesn't run into production. That's not as much of a problem now as it used to be because of the improvements in networking and the speed of the computers and the methodologies that we use to do it, right? We only back up incrementally change data every day. We don't do like full copies of backup. We have the smarts enough to kind of pull that off and help you recover quickly. So that's probably, kind of the answer to the question there. Then the question becomes is how do you ensure the survivability of those backup copies themselves? Like we said, the bad guys are attacking the on-prem environment. So if you only have one copy and it's right there next to the server that it lives on generally, the bad guys could very easy take that out, right? Or a physical issue could take that out. The data center went offline, you still couldn't recover. So for many years, there's been this concept of what they call the 3-2-1 rule. In other words, we want to have 3 copies of our data on 2 different physical media, at least one of which is offsite. And that's gotten a lot easier in the last, let's call it decade, because of the rise of cloud-based backups. It's not very uncommon anymore for organizations to, have a copy on-prem, right? So they can recover quickly, maybe send a copy to a secondary data center, and maybe even send a 3rd copy up to the cloud. That was exactly the format we used to help a milk production company based in upstate New York and New England recover from an event where their cyber tools were used against them, right? The bad actors actually got into their key vault, their password manager, and unhooked all of their cyber defense tools. Luckily, we worked with this organization to have a 3rd vaulted copy that was truly immutable in the cloud in a way that we could ensure them recovery, and that's how they did recovery from it. So what could have been a very catastrophic event in terms of data loss and downtime became a very minimal one because they took advantage of those kind of extra copies. The cost of the cloud is relatively cheap. We've come a long way from tape-based backups that somebody had to physically go move around or take off site and things like that. So it's not always about just can I recover? Again, it comes down to what is my process to recover and how long it will take.
Great, thank you. And we've done some work on cyber insurance and the difficulty or the challenges of getting cyber insurance and paying for cyber insurance. The premiums have been going up. The coverage is harder to get. The hoops you have to jump through seem to be growing on a regular basis. Can you talk about how a sound backup program can help with cybersecurity insurance?
Yeah, actually, Alexa, I think you've got a great story about this from one of your local customers. Maybe if you share that would help.
Absolutely. So I think when it comes to cyber insurance, there's 2 major things, right? One is actually getting the cyber insurance and qualifying for it, which is getting increasingly more difficult, it seems. There's just more and more checkboxes that you have to qualify for to even get the coverage. And then once you do get the coverage, depending on your plan that you have in place and the types of technologies that you have in place depends on, just like with any insurance, right, what your premium is going to be. So we had a situation where we had a school in New Jersey, actually, so not a very large organization by any means, but they were paying upwards of, I think it was $500,000 was their minimum for their cyber insurance premiums. And after they went through the process of implementing Rubric, we were able to satisfy a lot of the requirements, we were able to satisfy all of the requirements on their cyber insurance that they needed to get a reduction in what that premium was. And once they implemented, they were able to knock that down to $25,000. So it was a fraction of what that premium was. And ultimately, at the end of the day, paid for the solution in and of itself. So I think being able to qualify for it is just the first step, right? There's obviously the major factors that go into it that you need to have in place with things like, multi-factor authentication, securing at the user level. There's a lot of some technical details that go into it, but I think it's on a larger scale, it's ensuring that you have the best solution available and implemented within your environment, that not only are you protected, but you're minimizing that cost that you're having to put up front if you were to get hit with some sort of attack.
Great, thank you. I have no more questions in the queue, so I thought I'd give each presenter a minute to wrap up their thoughts on this presentation, and then we will conclude today's webinar. So, Joe or Alexa, who would like to go first?
Alexa first, please.
Okay. All right. So I would say, just in wrapping up today, my thoughts and what I think is most critical is that, backups are essential. They always have been. I think the way that we approach them and we use them in today's environment has drastically shifted from how we've always thought of them. Them typically being a necessity is something that now we're realizing we can extract a lot of value out of. So they really are our last line of defense when it comes to being able to recover and being able to make sure that we're available for our end users. So we need to start taking the education that we're getting out there from people who've undergone these, unfortunate breaches that they've had, who've lived and gone through these experiences of going through a recovery. We really need to take the time out of our busy schedules and make sure that we look internally and make sure that we have the best laid plan possible, and that it's not only in place, but everyone sort of knows their role in that organizational structure of how you would go about a recovery. And the thing is, you're not alone. Just ask. There's no shame in saying you need assistance with developing a cyber recovery plan. That's what we're here for. That's what people who have been through it before are more than willing to share. It's just an unfortunate reality that us being in the state and local government space that we are prime targets. So I think that would be my one big takeaway today. Just ask for the help and of those around you, and make sure you have a strong plan that everyone is on board with, that's frequently tested within your organization specifically.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexa. So from my point of view, I would go and ask as many questions as you can around what is our recovery plan. It's really the worst time to be learning that, there should have been some things done when you're under a recovery event, right? So go push that rock uphill, go have the uncomfortable conversations. Like Alexa said, there's plenty of people around New York State that want to help you. And there's plenty of people that have pretty good experience with this. I will, gladly come and see you, right? I can get my team up there. I can come up there. If you want to go into more details about how this stuff works and what good really looks like. We try to keep it very high level today, not get into the technology or actually the products at all, but more just highlight the implications of not dealing with the problem, right? And those implications hit us square in the face every day. Every morning I wake up and I have an unfortunate list of organizations in the public sector that are hit and really struggling to recover. So go push that rock uphill, go have the conversation, and you will be better off for it when the unfortunate day does come. So thank you for the time today.
Great, and thank you very much. Yeah, backups are a part of the overall cybersecurity improvement plan. Multi-factor authentication, having a recovery plan, doing tabletop exercises. They're all pieces of the puzzle that can help improve your cybersecurity posture at the local level. We thank Rubrik, we thank Joe and Alexa today for lending their time and expertise on this webinar. And for more information on the other webinars that we have done in this series, please go to www.nisac.org/cyber. There are some reports out there. There are some recordings of previous webinars. We're here to help raise the bar, raise the awareness level about cybersecurity for local leaders. So please give us a call if you need any assistance, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you.